back, everybody, to the BackMarkers F1 Show podcast here on YouTube. And if you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, we are so glad to be back here doing our podcast. It has been quite a long time since we brought you a new episode of the BMF1 Show podcast. But nevertheless, we didn't go away permanently. We just took a little bit of a break. But now we are back for good here in this 2023 season. Well, in case you forgot, my name is Chris Cato, joined by my fellow backmarkers, and super glad to connect with these guys once again, Tyler McDonald and Shaker Barty. Boys, it's really glad to have you guys back here doing a podcast just ahead of the new season. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, Chris. Nice to be able to connect with you boys again, and missed doing it in the second half of last season, but we didn't miss too much craziness, I guess. But no, it's great to be back and doing another podcast with you guys.
Yeah, no, I'm same feelings as Tyler. It's been forever, and we were talking about if we still remember how to do this, and it's going to take a little bit. It's like riding a bike. Well, first show is going to have some stumbles, so we'll see. I'm very excited to be back, though.
Yeah, likewise. The feeling is mutual. So if you guys notice any mistakes on our end, then please forgive us. But this is it's winter testing for us, so we're gonna work out the kinks before we go for real. But today's podcast is really just a chance for us three to reconnect, and also for us to reconnect with you guys, the fan base, as well. Because although we didn't do the podcast, we were still doing videos along the way for the season, maybe a little bit less than usual. But a lot of you were asking, "Where's the podcast? Are you guys not doing it anymore? When is it coming back?" So we always had some scheduling conflicts, and maybe we'll take the first 5 to 10 minutes to kind of just explain the reason why we were away and why we couldn't get things connected. And it was mainly because it was on my end. I had a pretty big move in last May of 2022. And not only did I move cities and houses, but I also moved countries as well. So I'm no longer located in Canada. I moved to Serbia, which is, of course, was part of the former Yugoslavia, which was the birthplace of my family. So we moved back here. So I am now located in Europe, and Serbia in particular. So I don't know how long I'll be here for, but definitely for the foreseeable future. So of course, Tyler and Shaker are still based back in Ottawa, Canada. So that was the kind of issue with always trying to get our schedules on the same time frame because of the big issue with the 6-hour difference in the time zone. And it was really difficult, of course, on my end too, with all the things that go into a move and so many other different personal problems that came along the way too. So it was really difficult to actually just even do videos for the channel on its own. So I do want to apologize for maybe the lack of content or towards the end of the 2022 season, and of course the lack of the BMF1 Show podcast. But I just wanted to give that explanation to everybody there as to why we were missing. We obviously wanted to do it, but we just could never get the schedules lined up. But I think that going forward for this season, we'll be able to make something work, and hopefully we'll do all of the podcasts with us three, but if not, then maybe it'll be Tyler and Shaker just coming to you from Ottawa, and maybe I'll jump in when I can. But nothing will really change on the channel, really. Of course, we're going to still have some great content and new ideas coming to the channel, but with me being located here in Europe, which is, of course, the epicenter of Formula One, you're going to be able to see a lot more kind of cool behind-the-scenes, on-location content. I'll have a lot more chances to go to races in person. It'll be a lot easier than being based in Canada, which of course we only get one race a year in our area, which is disappointing. But I'll be able to do a lot more cool things, I think, being here. If you guys saw it last season, I went to Belgrade for the Red Bull show run, which was a unique experience as well. So you should be seeing a lot of that cool stuff as well. But before I forget, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I am wearing a custom BMF1 Show shirt, and I do have another one here. Just to show you guys, this one is coming in a shade of white. So we got the logo there at the front. I don't know how you guys can see that, and then just a print on the back. It might be in reverse for the camera, but you guys kind of get the gist of the idea. So let us know in the comments below if you want to order a shirt, if you think we should launch the merch store for 2023. Let us know, because if there is a demand for them, we will definitely set something up. I know Tyler and Shaker, you guys are next in line to be getting a couple of these shirts for yourselves, and you'll see more of them on the episodes this year. But yeah, it's been long overdue. We've been talking about it for a while, and I got two printed for my birthday this year, and if I go out to some of these races here in Europe or different types of events, I'll be sure to wear my BMF1 Show merch, and let us know in the comments below, because you could be wearing it too.
Yeah, shirts, or if you guys are like interested in hoodies or something like that, that's probably something we can maybe look into, because I'm sure it's like the same manufacturer. But
Yeah, I guess same with hats too, or ball caps.
Anything,
But
yeah.
yeah, if you like, let us know what you guys are interested in. It's not, we're gonna get you guys stuff that you want to wear, not just what we want to wear.
Yeah, it's an option for this season. It's something that we could do to expand. So yeah, we'll do it as soon as the demand arises. So Tyler and Shaker will be holding it down in Ottawa, Canada. So because we didn't really get a chance to talk much about the end of the 2022 season, Tyler, I'm gonna kick the floor over to you, and I just take as much time as you want to maybe just give some of your thoughts on the 2022 season. What were some of your highlights, your lowlights, and overall, how did you think the new era of Formula One got off to a start last season?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm trying to wrap my head around kind of what happened the last half of the season and break it all down. But for me, it almost seemed like a little bit of a lull in what has been a crazy few years for Formula One. Ever since Drive to Survive came out, we see this nonstop craziness that just keeps happening and happening. And for the first time, these new fans have kind of seen what we're all used to watching F1, and that's a season where who the champion's going to be halfway through the season or 3/4 of the way through the season. So I felt that we were kind of not moving backwards, but we were starting to trend back to those 2014, 2015 years maybe, where we saw Lewis Hamilton dominate so much. This time, of course, it being Max Verstappen. So I thought, in terms of championship quality and drama-wise, was it on par? Of course, it can never be on par, I think, to the craziness we saw last year, or I should say 2021, 2 years ago, I guess now. But in terms of the actual racing, I thought the racing was phenomenal. I really enjoyed how these new cars raced throughout the entire season, and I thought we did see everything that was promised, was pretty much delivered. We saw that closer packed racing. We saw drivers struggle a lot more with these cars, try to learn a whole new different downforce package. Same with the teams. And, we saw a little bit of shakeup with Mercedes having a really tough season. And it was a very interesting season for a lot of different reasons that we've seen over years past. So all in all, we didn't miss, I guess, too much championship drama craziness, but there's definitely some stories that we did miss. And I will say right off the bat how disappointed I am that our guy, Nicholas Latifi, fellow Canadian, will not be on the grid next year. That's kind of the biggest heartbreak I have from this season, because he's been on the show a few times and really, really good guy. Take the time and come on our show, and of course a fellow Canadian as well. So it's tough to go for Nicholas, but a bright future ahead of him. And of course, we still have Lance Stroll on the grid as well. So we'll see how him and his new teammate Fernando Alonso does next season as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty much kind of on the same boat with Tyler, but I think based on what happened in the 2022 season, it's pretty much what we kind of suspected in terms of a lot of close wheel-to-wheel racing. And I think the only thing that, we weren't too sure of was there going to be a clear winner halfway through the season? And that was kind of going to define it usually defines if it's a good season or not, because it makes it interesting. And I think despite that, we saw close wheel-to-wheel racing, a lot of, and not just in the top of the grid, it was pretty much all over. So that was really nice to see. But yeah, I kind of agree by the time we got to the last 4 or 5 races of the season, I wasn't as excited as I was in the 2021 and 2020 seasons to see what was going to happen, if somebody was going to put up a fight for the championship winner. Despite the only drama being the Max and, Sergio drama towards the end of the season, there wasn't really anything that stood out, I would say. Which made all the other seasons so interesting. So yeah, I mean, I to be honest, I haven't really watched the last 2 seasons of Drive to Survive. I'm not super stoked for this next season too. That's just because there was no drama. I just felt like there was nothing really that Drive to Survive could really show, except for what was going on behind the scenes for the teams. So
I tell you, I'm actually really interested in Full Swing, which is the PJ Tour golf spinoff of Drive to Survive. It's from the same creators. They're doing the exact same thing, but with the PJ Tour. So I'm really interested in that, and I just wonder maybe how many people are going to kind of shift from, especially North America, shift from F1 to golf after this series, depending on how well it drops. I mean, it comes out a week or 2 weeks before the next season of Drive to Survive, so it'll be really interesting to see what the numbers are between those two series coming up.
There's also a tennis one that just came out, I believe, a few days ago. Basically, I'm pretty sure from the same makers of Drive to Survive. So it would be actually nice if they steal some of the fans away from F1, because ticket prices and attendance has been crazy the last 2 seasons. I mean, a lot of these Grand Prix are already sold out. I mean, we're talking almost a year in advance. So it would be nice if the Drive to Survive hype kind of cooled down a little bit, because certainly before Drive to Survive, I didn't notice this craziness surrounding actually attending Grand Prix races in terms of the amount of people there and how difficult it is to get tickets. So yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But I would agree with most of the points that you guys brought up there. I think that 2022 was overall a good season in terms of the new cars and the regulations. We had a lot of really good individual races, but like you guys mentioned, the overall championship was quite disappointing. I think after, I'd probably say, the Hungarian Grand Prix right around the summer break, we knew that this was over, and that Red Bull did this remarkable turnaround. Ferrari, of course, really screwed themselves up many times, and it was boring, though, at the end of the season, to be honest with you. And, you know, yes, Max Verstappen, he was a double world champion and drove a fantastic season, but it was still boring because we wanted to see those close battles like we did in 2021. So I think that some of the issues, though, with the new regulations are that we had a lot of DRS overtakes. So I think that that's an issue going forward that they'll have to address. And the only disappointing thing for me was that the field spread was much bigger than what I'd want it to be. You know, the top 3 teams, they were so far ahead of even McLaren, and then, of course, further down, Alpine and the rest of them. So I was kind of disappointed that I was hoping that maybe an Alpine or a McLaren could be a title contender, but looks like that's not going to be the case for at least another few years.
Yeah, it's a great point, Chris. The gap was a little too strong for me, and I do want to point out what a weird way for Max to win his second title. I mean,
I know, right?
The first way was odd in its own right, but I mean, I was watching F1 on their YouTube just put out the radio rewind from the Japanese Grand Prix from this year, and I was like, while I was watching it back, and like I had to remember that, oh yeah, this race was time shortened, so like they didn't know if there was an extra lap or not, and Max didn't know if he was the champion when he was in the TV room before the podium room before you go on the podium. And they released all that. He's like, are you sure I'm champion? Like, for sure, I'm champion. And like everyone's just kind of looking around awkwardly. It's just weird. What a weird way to do it. So yeah, that's another point to take up from this season.
Yeah, and I think honestly what didn't make this season as interesting it should be is because it was kind of the same storyline going into every single race. You know, either Ferrari has has pole going into the race, and can basically Max get this win coming from behind, and it would pretty much result in the same thing every single race. And like you mentioned, like halfway through the season, it wasn't very interesting anymore because you kind of knew what the results were going to be right before the race even started.
Yeah, it just goes to show that it's not, you know, when we were talking about this a few years ago, it wasn't a personal dig at, you know, Hamilton or Mercedes. It was the point of we want exciting races. We don't want one guy dominating, no matter if it's Hamilton or Verstappen. Because again, I think Shaker, like you mentioned, it wasn't as exciting to tune into those races towards the end of the season because there wasn't much happening. You know, Max would just pull out in front, with the exception of maybe a couple of races where they were off the balance, but I think overall it was okay. It was a decent, solid season, record-breaking season for Verstappen. Probably maybe something that we'll be able to see again in the future, just because of the extended amount of races on the calendar. But certainly, we also didn't get a lot of those crazy surprise podiums, right? I mean, Lando Norris was the only other driver outside of the big 3 teams to score a podium in 2022, versus the season before, where we had a lot of different drivers, even in the midfield, scoring podiums. So I'm hoping that that's going to correct itself going into 2023, because I hope that we're not going to see another 5-6 years of just Red Bull domination now. I think that would set the sport back quite a few years if it was like that. So fingers crossed. And we're going to get to the 2023 season in just a minute. But actually, just on that note, we're still obviously in the off-season, or not off-season phase, but the preseason phase. And we're discussing amongst ourselves and thinking of different types of videos and ideas that we could come to the channel. So if you guys didn't see on our social media platforms and on our YouTube community tab, we are doing a fan feedback /survey on Google Forms. So if you click the link, you just fill out, there's a couple of questions there in terms of what type of content you'd like to see. Just a couple of different questions just to give us some more information about you guys, the subscribers. So if you haven't already done that, please just take 2-3 minutes to fill that out, because that will help us as well, kind of directing the content for 2023. Of course, you won't be able to do everything you guys suggest to us, but sometimes we also need those ideas as well, because we get, writer's block and creative block as well. So, and at the end of the day, we are making the content for you guys as well, in addition to us. So yeah, check that out. I will be posting the link to that in the description of the video and the podcast below as well. So that means a couple of off-season things then that we can talk about that's happened recently, actually, within the past couple of days and weeks. And one of the big ones was a new team potentially entering the grid within the next few seasons. And we've had Porsche possibly coming in, which hasn't really happened. Of course, that Red Bull deal fell through. But this new one being Andretti in a team partnership with GM and Cadillac. And this is really interesting because Michael Andretti, he's been really trying to get into Formula One ever since really the last 2 seasons. And he's faced a lot of pushback. And Tyler, I was wondering if you saw a lot of the comments and the pushback from Formula One saying that, they weren't really excited or happy about this potential bid. And the FIA was more supportive of Andretti in his attempt to come into Formula One. But what do you make of some of the backlash that Andretti and GM have gotten into a potential entry into Formula One? And I know this question is right up your alley because you always talk about wanting more teams in Formula One. So the floor is yours.
Well, Chris, this sounds like a great storyline for Drive to Survive, doesn't it?
It does.
It sounds like a great storyline with all this drama going on. But no, seriously, if you're a listener of this podcast, you might have missed me actually saying it since I haven't been saying it over the last few months, but we need to have more teams on the grid, and 24 drivers on the grid. There's so much room for these drivers. We need to have, there's so much talent that isn't being used on the F1 grid right now. And even going into the next season, Daniel Ricciardo should have a ride. Mick Schumacher should have a ride. Nicholas Latifi should have a ride. It's just unfortunate that we haven't had the opportunities to show all the talents of all these drivers. And this is a great opportunity for F1 to continue their momentum into America. Yes, they have Haas as one of the American teams, but 2 American teams would be phenomenal. And to get an American engine manufacturer as well, in this case, Cadillac coming in under the GM brand, is phenomenal. I wasn't expecting it to run under Cadillac. I was expecting for it to run under Chevy. But Cadillac does have some racing pedigree, of course, throughout the Endurance series. And I think that's what they're going to be striving towards by using the Cadillac name. And it's maybe a little more luxurious than Chevrolet. You think of Cadillac, you kind of think of more of a classier, sportier car than a Chevrolet. So that could be that as well. But this is, I think, a no-brainer for F1 to bring these guys into the sport. And it brings more money into the sport, more eyes, a lot more sponsorship dollars coming from the American side as well. And it creates more drivers being able to get opportunities on the grid. They're trying to push so hard into America. They got 3 races next year. I don't understand why there is some sort of pushback on Andretti coming into F1. So it'd be great to see them. It'd be great to have another team come in as well. Of course, you mentioned Porsche, and Sauber is going to be taken over, but the naming rights are going to be changed as well. I believe that's to Audi, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Just making sure I get my facts straight. So more manufacturers coming in, which is great, but we need more individual teams as well.
Okay, so Shikar, are you muted or?
I was muted.
Okay. First mistake right there. What are we at 30 minutes in? That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
I mean, I was going to say I really have nothing more to add except for the fact that I'm excited for Audi to come in. That's not till the next year, right? Not 2023, but 2024. they're supposed to come in?
2026, actually.
2026.
Oh, is it?
Oh, hold
That
on.
was 2024,
Is
and
it-
then
Right,
the
and
naming
then
rights.
the naming rights. Okay, I think you guys are right about that. Yeah, I got too ahead of myself.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just really stoked for that. I've been wanting them to enter F1 since I started watching. So, and I will say maybe the Cadillac name is more to compete with like Mercedes and the Audi name rather than putting Chevy out there. Just because it's, like you said, it's a more luxurious brand and everything, right? And Mercedes, a lot of their money goes towards sponsorships and stuff as well. So it'd be good for Cadillac to be more in that F1 and luxurious kind of name.
You have to wonder if you're GM, maybe you're losing car sales to these manufacturers like Mercedes, like Audi, like Porsche, and this is a great opportunity to get the Cadillac name out there once more. So you might just have a whole financial backing of it. Just of we need to start selling more cars. So there's also the business perspective to think of as well behind all this movement.
Yeah, for sure.
It's certainly interesting to see how it'll play out. I know Andretti has been really getting a lot of roadblocks, and backlash with ever since, I think it was about 2 years ago that they really started to float the idea of, I know first it was with Sauber that they were potentially going to take them over, and then now with this GM and Cadillac bid. So it's unfortunate that we're seeing some of this backlash from some of these esteemed teams in Formula One, because I agree with you, Tyler. Of course, we need more teams in F1. I think we need at least 12 teams, go back to the 24-car days that we had a few years ago. So I really hope that something good will come out of this, because if we can get some of these legendary manufacturers, maybe like an Audi, like a Works Audi team or a Works Porsche team, along with Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull, who have now become the staples of the sport, it'll be really good as well. And it's just obvious with the push to America, forget the racing side. It's just what you guys mentioned. It's a business side, right? 3 races in the US, ridiculous amounts of money being poured into it from that side. So it would just make sense to have a fully American Works team, another one, and potentially one that's more successful than Haas, which is the only American team at the moment. We've got the new American driver this season, Logan Sargent. So there's another step in the right direction on both sides, the racing and also the business aspect. So yeah, let us know what you guys think in the comments below. This is kind of a developing story and situation. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of it going into winter testing, and of course as we enter the new season as well. But yeah, we've talked about it almost since day one of the podcast 5 or 6 years ago. Is we need more teams. We need more teams.
No, it's so true, and let's just hope that it comes true, that we get Andretti in there, at least getting it to 22, and who knows where we go from there. But we're still a few years away from it, so I'm sure as much as things have changed over the last 3-4 months with this storyline, I couldn't imagine what's going to happen in the next 3-4 years with this storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. And the new engine regulations in 2026 too plays a big factor in a lot of the new involvement or new excitement with manufacturers and companies wanting to enter the sport. So I hope it's all in the positive direction, but we'll see how it plays out. And I'm sure next podcast we'll have even more to talk about it as the situation develops. The next, or pretty much the last kind of breaking news story or news story that we've had in the offseason is one I actually just saw today. And I'm going to pull it up here. And Shaker, I know you saw this, but Tyler hasn't seen it yet. So we're going to get Tyler's live reaction here. And I will put on my glasses so that I can actually see this. So a new qualifying format is going to be trialed in 2023, only at 2 races, thankfully. So you kind of already know what my opinion on this is going to be. But they're going to try this out in 2 races this season. It's to be confirmed which events those will be, but I will read directly from the document here. And it says a revised qualifying format, short form RQF, will take place at up to 2 events in 2023 for the purpose of evaluating whether the revisions are suitable for subsequent championships, as per the updated regulations. So this is what the revised qualifying format will entail. This will see tire compounds mandated for each stage of F1's usual 3-part qualifying session. So what they want to do is to have hard tires only for Q1, medium tires only for Q2, and finally soft tires only in Q3. And then intermediates and wets will be allowed, of course, if the session is declared wet. At RQF events, each driver may use up to no more than 11 sets of dry weather tires, 4 sets of intermediate tires, and 3 sets of wet weather tires. So basically, in summary, only hard tires Q1, only medium tires Q2, and only soft tires Q3. What do you guys think of this proposed revised qualifying format?
Is that the only change? That's the only.
That is the only change, yeah.
I mean, okay. I mean, I like the idea, but if you're going to make a change, make a change. That's not a change, really. It's just putting a sticker over what's already happening. Everyone's already on the same compounded tire. Basically, the only thing you're doing is negating the strategic battle that we usually get to see in Q2 with who starts on mediums and who starts on softs, which is, brings an interesting perspective into Q2.
Which
So
we
really
don't don't even have that anymore because they got rid of that. I think was it last season, right? So it's just free
That's
tire
right.
choice.
Oh, you're right, actually. Yeah. So that doesn't even matter even more. So now I really don't even understand why they would do that. Like I like the idea. I like the kind of overall perspective behind it, but I just don't understand what it would change. Go for it, Shaker.
So I think again, not an engineer. I've said this many times on this podcast. But I think the only thing it brings it down to is, like you said, it takes away the tire choices and the strategic things in play by the teams, and it basically just boils it down to what the cars can perform it with those tires consecutively over lap time. So if they're using the same tire count compound in, like, say Q1, and they're starting with like old set used tires from like another race, that team might probably is going to be at a bigger advantage because that tire's already used. But if they're all using fresh hard tires, they all kind of have to go into it in terms of actually get the tires up to temp and stuff like that. So I think it doesn't change anything, Tyler. You're absolutely right, but I think it just dumbs it down for people who are watching, is all it is going to do. Is that if everybody's on the same tire compound, they're going to be setting the same lap time around the track. Basically, what comes down to their engine and the aero performance of the car with the same tire compound on each car. All I think it does is just dumbs it down for people, is what they're doing.
That's a really good point, actually. If you think of it, it's all set for TV and the viewer.
Yeah.
It's a great point, Shaker.
But again, not an engineer. This is just my theory.
Or it could complicate things even more because new fans are going to be sitting around going, "Wait, what tire are they on for this Q2? Is it which tire? The red one? No, that one's this one. The third Q? It's the white tire. Which one? The hard one?" It's like a couple years ago when they changed all the hypersoft and super soft and they got rid of all that. They had like 7 different names for the tire compound, so it could have the opposite effect. People might get even more confused now. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
controversially, I like the hypersoft and the super soft better than what the
Me too.
C3 and C2.
Are they still doing the what do you call it? Like the pre-race thing, whatever they were doing last year for the 5 races, that format that they ran?
Sprint format.
Yeah, there's more this year.
Yeah.
There's 6 this year now.
I mean,
about that. Like, I feel like they should just try out one, not have like 6 sprint races, 6 regular qualifying, and 2 of these.
I think it was, I could be wrong here, and I hope I'm not, but I was listening to Daniel Ricciardo's interview he did on the Dak Shepard podcast. Really good interview, if you guys have the time to listen. But I think this is from this interview, and please don't, if I'm wrong, please tell me in the chat, but don't blast me. Just, tell me politely. But I think Daniel Ricciardo said he enjoys the 2 races per weekend because you get tired of practice as a driver, and it creates a little bit more drama. Like, the drivers want to race, so he actually enjoyed the sprint races. But I just wonder if 6, you're starting to get to a slippery slope with the amount of sprint races you're going to have, and with this whole cost cap. I mean, we saw, now we're going to get into this in a second here, because actually I'm remembering what really bugged me last year. So if we get into the whole cost cap thing, of course, more races equals possible more crashes, more damage for these manufacturers to have to squeeze in this cost cap. But what we did see last year was Red Bull get away with going over the cost cap. So I don't understand, for barely a nothing penalty. if we're going to go over the cost cap, we need to put a points penalty on the manufacturer, not a fine. Are we all in agreement to that? I think that's just a no-brainer. I don't understand why there wasn't a points deduction against Red Bull.
Or what's the point of the cost cap?
Exactly.
No,
Right.
but we could get to that topic next. But just to bring it back to this new revised qualifying format, when I read it, my only reaction was why. Yeah. I'm like, when we look at the priority of the things that we need to change to improve the racing, and they always, I don't get what is wrong with the people who are running Formula One, where every couple of years they have this urge. It's like almost a rash that they have to scratch of like, we need to change the qualifying format. We need to change the qualifying format. And then it's always the worst ideas to change the qualifying format. I mean, people still have like PTSD from that change in 2016 or whatever it was. I don't even know what the name of that qualifying was. But I
don't know what that was.
I think it was so bad they canceled it like mid-qualifying session. They're like, we're done. Like, let's just restart. We're going back to Q1, Q2, Q3. It was just that bad. But I don't understand it. I mean, to me, in qualifying, you want to see the cars on the lightest fuel with the tires that have the most grip so that we can get the best laps possible. Because, I mean, really, if you're, let's say, one of these backmarker teams, running that soft compound tire in qualifying, if you got a driver in your car that can extract the most performance out of the car with the softest tire, that could get you into Q2, maybe even Q3. For example, the Williams in the last couple of years. But now you strap on a set of hard tire compounds for that first Q1 session, maybe that just doesn't interact well with the car. So they're going to have basically no chance of getting any sort of lap time performance out of the tire. Again, I'm not an engineer anyway, so maybe I'm not thinking about it the right way, but I just don't understand the point of it. I think it was much more simplified when they got rid of the Q2 starting tire rule and they just said, strap on whatever tire you want. Now the new fans know that it's going to be the red tire, the C3 or the C5. It's the softest compound tire. It's the tire that's going to give you the most amount of grip for qualifying. That's what I'd like to see personally. I just don't understand what the point of this is. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of cars, struggling to bring up tire temperatures in that Q1 lap. I think we're just going to see a decrease in the excitement of qualifying sessions, in my opinion. And maybe that's the goal, because they're going to end up making qualifying so obsolete that they're just going to say sprint races for every single race. And we're no longer even going to see the excitement of a one-lap qualifying lap, which to me is still one of the most exciting things about Formula One. My vote, and I've always said this, is that they should go back to how they used to do it in the old days, which is maybe not for every single session, but at least in Q3, the top 10 drivers, each driver goes out individually and has like one chance to set a lap, and that's it. And then everybody, the whole cameras, the whole broadcast, everybody at the track, they're focused on just that one car on the track. And that's when all the pressure's on, because everybody's watching that one driver go for pole. To me, that would make it much more exciting and would put a lot of value into qualifying of why people should watch. Because now, most times we don't even get to see the pole position lap in qualifying because we're focusing on 10 different drivers. So that's personally the only change that I'd make for qualifying. Other than that, I think the format's okay the way it is.
I think it's a great idea, Chris. That's what NASCAR does. They do, they have 2 rounds now. They kind of did a happy medium of F1 and the old style NASCAR. NASCAR just you get 2 laps, and every car goes and does those 2 laps. Now there's a round 1 and a round 2, and the top, I don't know, whatever, 10 cars make it to 12 cars, make it to round 2, and they get 1 lap each to get to whoever's going to be pole position. Yeah. And it's a great happy medium, because you have that drama of, okay, this guy set the fastest lap and now he's waiting in the pits to see if he gets it.
Exactly.
So I like that format, but like you said, maybe it is a way for F1 just to keep introducing those sprint races. Who knows?
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like a time trial qualifying is definitely the best way to go. It kind of settles how fast you can take your car with no interruptions, right? And like I just want to go back to your point, Chris. Like, yes, changing the rules every year is not going to do anything, especially if they're like placing those qualifying. If qualifying isn't working in like a specific race, like say you go to Singapore for a night race, or like, a closed off track. I'm trying to think, like Saudi Arabia is a closed off track, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah,
pretty much, yeah.
Like somewhere where you can only really have one car going down, and you can't have two cars racing side by side going down a straight. Maybe change like the qualifying rules for that specific track for it didn't work the last year beforehand, but not. I just don't understand like half we're gonna do regular qualifying, 6 sprint, and 2 random ones that we just made up. It doesn't add anything interesting or anything like that to F1 except for making everybody else confused onto what's going on. It's just consistency is important in sports. So like I just don't understand why the change every like few years or so for some random races.
Exactly, and it's the sport is hard enough to follow for guys like us who by no means we're not experts, we're just passionate fans. But we've been following the sport for the last 5-6 years on this channel, almost as a profession, just doing content for it, and as fans for even longer. But even for me, it's sometimes difficult to keep up with the rule changes and trying to explain it to some of you guys out there who are maybe new into the sport. I mean, imagine if you're watching football or basketball or any other sport and they kept changing the rules every 2 seasons or 3 seasons and doing all these ridiculous trials. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And that's the one thing I don't like about the sprint races and the weekends. And Tyler, we can go to your point now. I don't like the sprint weekends just because, in terms of the races, Max Verstappen said this, when you get to the sprint race, you're just trying to be careful not to damage the car so you don't mess up your Sunday, which is where it all counts. And I just think that they're really taking the value out of qualifying. And for me, qualifying is very exciting. And I think it should be more important than what it is now because it really shows the driver's skill of, okay, which driver can extract the most out of the car, who can drive the best at the limit and under the most amount of pressure, which I think is very exciting. So I'm not a big fan of the sprint race weekends. I mean, okay, it's nice to see more racing, and some of the sprints this year were okay. I think that they need to be smart with which venues they do it at, that's for sure. But I think we're only going to see more of these sprint races, and unfortunately these qualifying format changes too.
Yeah, which of course has everything just led to TV broadcasts and what's going to get the most viewership, right? What's going to create the most income? And that's probably sprint races. People are going to be more inclined to tune into those sprint races. So in the end, everything's a business, and you have to find that balance of balancing the money aspect and creating as much income as you can, but also keeping your fans happy, and especially your hardcore ones who have been there since, for 30, 40, 50 years. They're the ones that kind of help get the sport where it is. And if it wasn't for those fans buying in 30, 40, 50 years ago, we wouldn't really have what we have exactly right now. So it's a fine balance, and, Liberty's trying to find exactly where they can put their toes in and not, I don't know, not overpour the water. It's a terrible saying, but whatever the saying is, you get what I'm trying to say.
I got you.
I forgot what I was going to say. So
it was the rubbish that was coming out of my mouth. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Don't worry, by race 2 or 3, you're going to be poetic.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Well, let us know what you guys think of the revised qualifying format, and of course the addition of the sprint races as well. It's definitely interesting, and it's no disrespect to the Drive to Survive fans, because it's great to have new fans in the sport. But it's kind of like when, it's like when we all used to listen to Drake when he was first coming out, right? And he was doing all those hits before he went mainstream. And now that everybody's a Drake fan, you're kind of just sitting there watching like, I was following this guy before it was cool. And that's kind of how I feel it is now with Formula One, where, we were there before it was cool, before it was mainstream. And I don't want to say that the Drive to Survive fans or era are ruining it, but I've certainly noticed far more interest in the business side of things than the actual racing side of things. So
Sorry, Chris. So they're definitely not ruining it, because, again, although you did have those fans 50 years ago, you do need new fans to keep growing the sport to help it last another 50 years. So I wouldn't say they're ruining the sport. I'd say it has 100% to do with everyone behind the scenes trying to create as much money as they can. And like I said, I think there's a balance there that they have to find, and they just haven't found it yet. Las Vegas isn't the balance. You don't go to Las Vegas for a balance in life.
I think Tyler, really good point. Like, we need those new fans, continue the tradition, go for another 30, 50 years. And I like, as much as I hate the sprint races, and like, it is a commercial thing in the end, right? They sell more tickets to two races basically every race weekend that they have a sprint race, which draws more fans in, which is going to get more people to watch at the end of it. So, I mean, yeah, it is really annoying, but like you said, we really don't need those new fans to keep going for what we have. And like, we're kind of in this lull where like, yeah, Drive to Survive has brought in a bunch of new fans, but it's also brought in, like, unfortunately, a bunch of misinformation at the same time. Like, talking to one of my friends who's like, "Oh, I didn't realize Ferrari was such a big team," and I'm like, "What?" Like, Ferrari was F1 for the longest time, Like, it's like the new fans who don't know the history behind it, who just watch Drive to Survive. And it's just that, it's just misinformation and people who don't go back and do the research of the sport. So
yeah, we'll see where it goes. But they've got something that they've always got to change something, which I'm not a fan of. So, but that kind of brings us full circle now into we can wrap up the podcast with just a quick look ahead to 2023. We are recording this now about in the middle of January, so the first launches of 2023 are really only a few weeks away. I think Williams is the earliest one on February 6th, but we are getting new ones coming out every now and again. But a lot of them are happening within the first 2 weeks of February. So we're going to be here covering that and doing our kind of just reactions to the liveries and things of that nature. So just your initial thoughts, guys, just a couple of minutes here before the end of what are you looking forward to in 2023 the most this season?
It's a good question. I'm interested to see if anyone can bounce back and try to catch Red Bull. How close is the championship actually going to be, or are we going to see Red Bull domination like we saw with Mercedes? And I'm looking ahead at the schedule too, and other than one race in April, round 4, that hasn't been decided where that's going to be yet. I think it's a really interesting schedule. I mean, there's a couple of races that I would love to see on there, Germany. But other than that, I'm excited to see what these tracks are going to bring. Of course, we have Qatar coming back in to host another race. The US is hosting 3 races. We'll see how that Las Vegas Grand Prix turns out in November. It's almost a year away.
Still no Germany though, eh?
No Germany again this year, and you just wonder where that round 4 is going to be. I don't think it's going to be in Germany. Probably somewhere like Portugal again, I would guess. And I like Portugal, like Portimao. How's Saudi Arabia going to be with the new track layout changes that they made as well? So a couple of interesting points, and yeah, it's just going to be one of those where I hope someone can come back and fight Red Bull this season, and I hope we see Ferrari, or I hope we see Mercedes, or a surprise team come up and I'd take the Constructors Championship, or at least change the Drivers Championship. I think it'd be dangerous to have Max win 3 times in a row. Not that he doesn't deserve it or couldn't earn it. I just think that growing as a sport, to create those rivalries, we need someone else there as a world champion to challenge Max.
Yeah, I agree. And for that, I'm actually very excited. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to this season is actually the partnership rivalries within the teams. Because at this point, we have almost, 6 people who could be contending for the world championship if they have a good car. Max, Sergio, Lewis, George, both the Ferraris. And then even the Alpine partnership, I'm very looking forward to that French connection that they have going on. It's also a rivalry as well. They both grew up together, racing together, and they both want to win it for France. So I just think the team dynamics for next year are very, very interesting. And I think it's really up to, as usual, it's up to the teams to kind of deliver the cars and just keep delivering the cars next year. Because we saw, last year, I think that was a big thing. Max and Sergio were put in this car that they weren't super confident with, and everybody thought to lean towards Ferrari to be the championship winners and the constructors winners of last year, and they were proven wrong. A third of the way through the season. So I think it's gonna be very interesting to see what happens if they get delivered the right cars and consistency. So yeah, I think it should be really good.
Yeah, two things that I'm looking forward to the most. One, in addition to the obvious one, which is let's see how close the championship battle is and the entire field in general. But I'm looking forward to a lot of these new teammate partnerships that we had. You guys mentioned a couple there, but one of the ones I'm intrigued the most is Fernando Alonso's move to Aston Martin alongside Lance Stroll, which I think poor Lance Stroll is going to be in for quite the challenge this season. But I think that Aston Martin kind of ended the season on a positive note in terms of development, and they recovered a lot from their early season struggles. So I think maybe Alonso finally made the right career move at the right time, at least hopefully for his sake he did. But he's got a lot of fire and a lot of passion still going into, I don't even know what, I think this is 20-something year in Formula One. So I'm really curious to see how he gets on, and other drivers as well, like Oscar Piastri at McLaren after that whole big contract drama and saga that he had. That's going to be a lot of pressure for him going up against Lando Norris, who just got even better last season. So that's going to be really interesting. And also just at the front, Tyler, like you mentioned, if Red Bull have a good car again, dominant car again, I'm curious to see if anybody, number one, will be able to challenge them in terms of car performance. And if they do, let's say Ferrari is on the same level of performance as a Red Bull or Mercedes, I'm curious to see if any driver can actually beat Max Verstappen, because he was driving at such a high level last season. Many people think that he's only getting better. He obviously says himself that he's got room to improve and be even better. But I'm actually really curious. And can any of these drivers actually beat Max Verstappen in his current form in somewhat equal machinery? I don't think Sergio Perez can do it, but can the likes of Leclerc or Hamilton or Russell be able to actually beat him in a straight up fair fight, which is going to be really interesting to see, because I just think he was so good last season, despite the domination, and it did make it boring. But we often forget in times of domination of just how good and how amazing some of those drives were. So those are just a few of the things that I'm looking forward to. And then, of course, just some of these new tracks like Las Vegas, just for the absolute scenes that we're going to see there. It's just going to be interesting for that reason.
Yeah, you thought Miami was ridiculous. Wait till they hit Las Vegas. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah. No comment.
It's going to be interesting. Hey, and I wonder how, if we see any developments with some of the reserve drivers. Most importantly, Daniel Ricciardo, reserve driver now at Red Bull. You know, maybe if Sergio isn't up to par at the start of the season, do we see Daniel Ricciardo come in? It's another interesting perspective there. I think that he's back in the Red Bull kind of scheme of things, and I mean, we'll see what happens over at AlphaTauri as well, and maybe Ricciardo. I mean, they have Nick DeVries coming in with Yuki Tsunoda this year, and we'll see how Tsunoda does at the start of the season as well. And I'm sure they won't get rid of DeVries at the start of the season, but we always see that sort of drama in terms of a mid-season driver change. And I think Daniel Ricciardo might be who everyone's kind of after during this mid-season shakeup that we usually try to see.
Yeah, I mean, it should be quite interesting. And Chris, I don't think anybody could challenge Max. I think this is the same conversation we had 2 years ago, that if we were to put Max and Lewis in a Mercedes, who would win it on 1v1? And I think we all voted for Max. I think there's no one, maybe except for Charles Leclerc in like 2 years, if he gets put in a good Ferrari, that would be able to compete, in my opinion. But who knows? Yeah, so I'm very much looking forward to this season.
Yeah, it's going to be record breaking just in terms of the races once again, and hopefully it'll be a good year, an exciting year as well. And yeah, it was obviously pretty quiet from us in terms of content on the channel, but it was kind of deliberate in a way too, because it was good to get a break. I mean, the last 2 seasons or 2 years of Formula One have been very intense with not much of a break in between. So to get this longer off season has actually been quite nice, because it's good to recharge the batteries, take your mind off of racing a little bit, and you get to find the passion for Formula One again after you take a break. So from now going forward until at least the summer break, you'll be seeing regular content from us coming from the channel. Of course, this being the first edition of the podcast in 2023, and hopefully many more to come. So I think that we're going to be not doing, of course, weekly podcasts right now because there's not much going on, but certainly once the season gets going, we're going to try and get a podcast out to you guys every single week following a Grand Prix. So that'll about do it for this episode of the podcast, episode number 132. I will leave it to you guys, Tyler and Shaker, if you have any final thoughts or comments or anything that you'd like to share before we get out of here.
No, I'm just happy to be back doing the podcast with you guys, and happy to be back in front of everyone. Hopefully you guys all enjoy what we have coming up this season, and I'm excited to rip apart some terrible liveries in a couple weeks.
Terrible or like the same as last year?
Yeah, both.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, I honestly, this is the one year where I'm kind of like, yeah, the liveries are pretty much like not going to change. But maybe I don't have my hopes up too high for it. So once they're out, I'll be all excited for it. To lead with anything, yeah, I don't think Lewis is going to retire until he wins this last championship. So I guess we're going to be seeing Lewis for like another 3 to 5 years. And I think that's what I'll leave it with.
No, that's good. We'll see if you're right. I think they're negotiating a new contract. So yeah, you could be right with that. He doesn't look like he's ready to quit yet. We'll hold you to that prediction when the time comes. We'll leave it there for now for this edition of the podcast. We wanted to reconnect, of course, thoroughly enjoy being back here to record another podcast. And I'm glad that we weren't as rusty as I thought we would be after so many months away. And just a quick thank you to everybody as well for the continued support to the channel. And we appreciate everybody being so patient with the return of the podcast and just with everything going on in our personal lives as well, to be able to stick to the channel and also to always support us as well. So it really means a lot to us, and we hope that you keep subscribing and keep watching our content for this season, because I think we're going to be putting out a lot of interesting videos as well. And I think we've got a lot of unique stuff coming to the channel too. And with me being located here in Europe, I think we'll see a lot more exciting stuff coming to you on the ground as well at some of these F1 races and different events and things like that. So stay tuned to the channel on YouTube. Of course, if you are listening elsewhere, subscribe, iTunes, Spotify, always be following the podcast. And we are on social media as well, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Links can be found in the description below. Any final words for you guys?
All good here.
Yep.
Super. All right, guys. Thank you again for listening for today's episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and like this video on YouTube. Share it with your friends. Let everybody know the BMF1 Show podcast is back live on the air, and we'll be with you again soon. For Tyler McDonald, Shaker Barty, I've been Chris Cato for this episode. I can't wait to have you guys along with us again real soon. Talk to you then.